"You're coming with me." The words left Hattie Lou Sinclair's lips before her mind could catch up to her heart. The mountain man sprawled beside the water trough didn't respond. Blood caked his temple. His breathing came shallow and broken. The station master spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Ain't your concern, woman. Let the buzzards have him." Hattie's fingers found the silver locket at her throat. The dying stranger had whispered something that sounded like Marcus. Her brother's name. The brother who died of fever 3 winters past. Or so she'd been told. Red Canyon Station squatted in the Montana Territory like a wounded animal. Dust devils danced between the weathered buildings. The stagecoach that brought her here already disappeared over the ridge. Its departure left only silence and the smell of sage. She'd come to meet Thomas Whitmore, her mail-order husband, the man who promised safety in his letters, security, a new life away from Mississippi and the lies that chased her north. But Thomas wasn't here. The stranger was. Hattie knelt beside him. His face carried the weathered lines of a man who lived hard under open sky. A beard covered his jaw, his clothes smelled of pine and wood smoke, of freedom. "Ma'am, you best step away from that one." The station master's voice carried warning. "Bad men been through here asking about him. The kind that don't ask twice." She ignored him. The stranger's lips moved. No sound came out, but she read the shape of the word, Marcus. Her hands shook. 3 years since fever took her brother. 3 years of wondering why his letters stopped so sudden. Why no body came home for burial. "Help me get him into my wagon." "Lady, you gone simple in the head." Hattie stood, dust on her traveling dress, determination in her spine. "I said help me." The station master shook his head. "Your funeral, literally." They hauled the unconscious man to her wagon. His weight surprised her. Solid muscle beneath torn clothing. Scars marked his hands. Working hands. Fighting hands. She'd scouted an abandoned cabin 2 miles east during the stage stop. Insurance against Thomas proving false. Against promises turning to lies like they always did. The wagon wheels cut through sand and scrub grass. The stranger's breathing grew more labored. She pushed the horses harder. The cabin sat in a grove of cottonwoods. Someone had loved this place once, built it to last, to shelter dreams that probably died with the first hard winter. Hattie dragged the stranger inside. Her muscles screamed. Her traveling dress tore at the shoulder. She didn't care. She'd learned doctoring from her grandmother, how to clean wounds, how to fight fever, how to pull men back from death's door when death didn't deserve to win. Water from the well ran clear. She heated it over a fire built from broken chair legs. The stranger's wounds weren't deep. A knock to the head, cuts on his arms, exhaustion more than injury. While cleaning blood from his temple, her hand bumped something in his vest pocket. She pulled out a silver locket, identical to the one around her neck. Her breath caught. She opened both lockets. Hers held Marcus's picture. His held the image of a woman with kind eyes. But the lockets themselves were perfect matches. Same size, same engravings, same tiny imperfection in the silver near the clasp. Marcus had never told her where his locket came from, said it was a gift from a friend. She'd assumed some girl in town, some secret romance her serious brother never shared. But this changed everything. The stranger stirred. His eyes opened. Gray as storm clouds, confused at first, then sharp, alert, dangerous. He tried to sit up. She pressed him back down. "Easy, you're safe." His gaze found her face, studied it like he was reading a map. His voice came rough as gravel. "Who are you?" She hesitated. The forged papers in her bag said Sarah Johnson. Widow, respectable, harmless. But something about this man made lies feel impossible. Hattie Sinclair. His eyes widened. Recognition flickered there. And something else. Sorrow. Marcus's sister. Not a question, a statement, like he'd been expecting her. Like Marcus had described her face around some campfire under distant stars. "You knew my brother." He closed his eyes. Pain crossed his features, not from his wounds. "I was with him when he died." The words hit her like physical blows. Marcus hadn't died of fever in some boarding house. He'd died out here, in this wilderness. with this stranger watching. Fever didn't take him. No, tell me. He struggled to sit up again. This time she let him. His hand went to his vest pocket, found it empty. She held up his locket. Looking for this, he nodded. They killed him for it. For what it represents. For what all 5 of them represent together. 5. 5 men saw something they shouldn't have seen. At Crow's Nest Mine. A massacre. Innocent miners killed for their claims. Marcus was trying to gather evidence. Trying to find the other witnesses. Hattie's world tilted. Her quiet brother. Her studious brother who read law books by candlelight. Who talked about justice like other men talked about weather. Who killed him? Men who take orders from powerful people. Men who don't leave witnesses. Outside, wind picked up. It rattled the cabin's loose boards. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Another answered. The stranger watched her face. They'll come for me too, for the locket, for what I know. You should run. Where? Anywhere but here. She thought of Thomas Whitmore, of the safe life he promised, of marriage to a man she'd never met, of pretending to be someone else until the lies became truth. Then she looked at the locket in her palm, at the stranger who'd shared her brother's last moments, who carried Marcus's secrets in his gray eyes. What's your name? Nathaniel Thatcher. Nate? Well, Nate, looks like running isn't working out too well for you. Something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition of shared loss, of debts that needed paying. They'll kill you if they find you with me. They'll kill me anyway, eventually, for being Marcus's sister, for carrying his blood. The truth of it settled over them both. She'd been running from one set of lies toward another. But Marcus's death demanded something different, something harder than safety, justice. What do we do now? She asked. Nate's hand found hers. His fingers were warm, strong, alive. We make them pay. Fever took Nate again before dawn. He thrashed against blankets that couldn't warm him, spoke to ghosts in words Hattie couldn't catch. She pressed cool cloth to his forehead, watched shadows dance across his face. In the gray morning light, she studied his belongings. A worn leather satchel, a hunting knife with a bone handle, clothes that had seen too many nights under stars, everything a man needed when the world had no place for him. The second locket felt heavier than her own. She opened it again. The woman in the photograph had gentle eyes, a mother's face, someone who'd loved Nate before the wilderness claimed him. Mary, his voice came cracked and distant, should have married you. Hattie's hand stilled. The fever was talking, revealing secrets meant for darkness. She fed the fire with broken furniture. The cabin held the bones of someone else's dreams, a rocking chair missing one runner, a table scarred by knives and weather, curtains that might have been yellow once. Outside, wind carved patterns in the dust, erased them, carved them again. Her own ghost stirred. Mississippi, the Weatherby plantation house. Mrs. Weatherby's diamond brooch disappearing the same day Hattie changed the bed linens. The accusation delivered with silk-wrapped venom. The sheriff who wouldn't meet her eyes. Steal from us, did you? Mrs. Weatherby's words still echoed. After all our Christian kindness. Christian kindness. Working 16-hour days for barely enough to eat. Watching the Weatherby children learn to read while she scrubbed their floors. Being grateful for scraps. The brooch turned up later in the parlor, fallen behind a cushion. But the damage was done. Hattie was already on a northbound train with her grandmother's silver locket and $43 saved penny by penny. No apology ever came. Nate's breathing evened. The fever broke like storm clouds parting. He slept deeper now, healing sleep. She heated beans over the fire, listened to the silence. In Mississippi, silence meant danger. Here it felt different, honest. Hoofbeats shattered the quiet. Hattie moved to the window. 3 riders approached through the cottonwoods. Their horses picked careful paths through the scrub, men who knew how to hunt. She shook Nate awake. His eyes opened clear. Company, she whispered. He struggled upright. Reach for the hunting knife. How many? 3. The riders stopped 50 yards out. Their leader was a thin man with pale eyes. His coat had seen better decades. The other 2 flanked him, waiting. You in the cabin, the leader called. We're looking for a friend of ours, mountain man, Answers to Nate. Nate's jaw tightened. He knew the voice. Tom Cassidy, he breathed. The name meant nothing to Hattie, but the way Nate said it meant everything. This friend owes us something, Cassidy continued. Something silver, something valuable. Silence stretched between cabin and riders, a test of wills played out in stillness. We know you're in there, Thatcher. Your tracks lead straight here. Come out peaceful and the woman lives. Hattie's hand found the rifle leaning against the wall, her grandfather's gun. The one thing he'd left her besides stories about better days. Nate shook his head. Mouthed the word no. What's it going to be? Cassidy's voice carried the patience of a man who'd done this before. Easy way or hard way, wind rattled the cabin walls. Somewhere a door banged against its frame. The sound of abandonment, of dreams left to rot. The riders didn't move. Professional killers knew the value of patience. Hattie thought about Thomas Whitmore, about the safe life she'd traveled here to claim, about marriage to a stranger who might protect her from other strangers. Then she looked at Nate, at the man who'd held her brother's hand when death came calling, who carried Marcus's secrets and his silver locket. Some debts couldn't be paid with safety. There's a back way out, Nate whispered. Through the root cellar, you can reach the trees. What about you? I'll hold them long enough for you to get clear. She studied his face, the weathered lines, the gray eyes that had seen too much dying. He meant it, would throw his life away to buy her a few minutes of freedom. No, Hattie. I said no. She moved to the window. Cassidy sat his horse with the ease of a man born to the saddle. His companions looked restless, hungry. Time's up, Thatcher, Cassidy called. That's when Hattie saw them. More riders coming from the east. These wore cleaner clothes, rode better horses. Thomas Whitmore led them. Her Maylord, her husband, had finally come calling. But the company he kept made her blood run cold. A territorial marshal's badge glinted on one rider's vest. Official business. Nate followed her gaze. Friends of yours. Supposed to be. But nothing about Thomas looked friendly. His face carried the hard lines of a man with grievances. Behind him rode 4 others, the marshal, 2 deputies, a 4th man who looked more gunfighter than lawman, 2 groups of killers, the cabin between them. This gets more interesting, Nate said. Thomas reined up near Cassidy. Words passed between them, too quiet to hear. But their body language spoke volumes. They knew each other. Ma'am, Thomas called toward the cabin, I'm Thomas Whitmore, your intended husband. You missed our appointment. His voice carried hurt feelings, wounded pride, the tone of a man who'd been embarrassed in front of others. There's been some confusion, he continued. The marshal here tells me you stole money from me, ran off with some saddle tramp. Hattie's hands shook. She'd never taken a penny that wasn't hers, never even seen Thomas's money. Course, I told him that couldn't be right, Thomas said. Told him my Sarah was a good Christian woman, respectable. The emphasis on "my" cut deep. Ownership claimed on a woman he'd never met. Nate touched her shoulder. What money? There is no money. I never took anything. His eyes searched her face, found truth there. Then why are they here? The question hung between them. Outside, the 2 groups of riders formed a loose circle around the cabin. Professional, coordinated. This wasn't about stolen money, or even about the silver lockets. This was a trap. Set long before she'd ever answered Thomas Whitmore's advertisement, before she'd found Nate bleeding in the dust. Someone had been waiting for Marcus Sinclair's sister, someone with resources, with patience, with the kind of reach that turned territorial marshals into hunting dogs. The wind picked up. Dust devils spun between the riders. The sky was turning the color of old blood. What do you want? She called out. Just a conversation, Thomas replied. About your brother, about things he might have told you before he died. The words confirmed her fears. This had always been about Marcus, about secrets he'd carried to his grave. Except he hadn't carried them to his grave. He'd shared them with the mountain man bleeding in her arms. Nate checked the rifle's load. How many rounds? 6 in the gun. Box of shells in my bag. Against 8 men. 7, she corrected. The marshal might be honest. Nate's laugh held no humor. In my experience, honest marshals don't ride with the Cassidy brothers. Outside, the riders closed their circle. The trap was complete. The standoff stretched into afternoon. Heat pressed down on the cabin like a heavy hand. Sweat traced lines through the dust on Hattie's face. Beside her, Nate watched the riders through gaps in the weathered boards. "They're waiting for something," he said. Outside, Thomas paced beside his horse. The marshal sat motionless in his saddle. Tom Cassidy cleaned his fingernails with a knife blade, patient as death. "What do they want us to do? Make a mistake?" The sun climbed higher. No water left in the cabin. The well stood 20 yards away. Might as well be 20 miles. Nate's fever had broken but left him weak. His hands shook when he thought she wasn't watching. The head wound still seeped blood through the makeshift bandage. "Tell me about Marcus," she said. "Tell me how he really died." Nate was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of witnessing. "We were tracking the other locket holders, men who'd seen the massacre at Crow's Nest. Your brother believed 5 witnesses could bring down Governor Hayes. Stop the killing. Governor Hayes ordered the massacre. Hayes owns half the territorial legislature, owns judges, owns men who wear badges and call themselves lawmen. The mining claims at Crow's Nest were worth more than most men see in a lifetime." Hattie thought about the marshal outside, about Thomas and his convenient arrival, about traps laid with infinite patience. The miners who died. They wouldn't sell. German immigrants, families. They'd found silver but wanted to work the claims themselves. Hayes made them an offer. They said no. The story unfolded in Nate's measured words. The midnight raid. The miners cut down in their beds. Children who'd never see another sunrise. All for silver that would buy politicians and judges and territorial expansion. Marcus was going to be a lawyer, Hattie said. He believed in justice. Justice got him killed. But there was no bitterness in Nate's voice, only sorrow for a world that turned good men into corpses. How many others? 3 found dead before we could reach them. Made to look like accidents. Your brother was the 4th. That leaves me. And now me. He turned from the window, met her eyes. "You don't have to be part of this. I became part of it the moment I pulled you into my wagon." The truth settled between them. Some choices couldn't be undone. Some paths led only forward. "What was Marcus like?" Nate asked. "Before all this?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, grief threatened to break her composure, but she pushed it down, focused on better memories. Serious, always reading, always asking questions about why things were the way they were. She touched the locket at her throat. "He used to say the law was bigger than any one man, bigger than money or power. He died believing that." "Did he suffer?" Nate's silence was answer enough. Outside, one of Cassidy's men dismounted, started walking toward the cabin, casual, like he was visiting neighbors. "Here we go," Nate muttered. The man stopped 10 feet from the door, young, cocky, the kind who thought violence made him important. "You folks getting thirsty in there," he called. "Hot day for a standoff." Hattie moved to the rifle. Nate shook his head. "What's your offer?" Nate called back. "Simple trade, you come out peaceful, hand over the locket, the lady walks free. And then you and me have a conversation about the other witnesses, about where they might have hidden their lockets before they died." The young gunman's smile was audible in his voice. He enjoyed this part, the cat playing with wounded mice. "Counter offer," Nate said. "You ride away now. Live to see tomorrow." Laughter carried on the wind, not just from the young man, from all the riders. "That's not very friendly," the gunman said. "Maybe the lady would be more reasonable." He took another step toward the cabin. Hattie saw his hand drift toward his pistol. The rifle bucked in her hands. Dirt exploded at the man's feet. He jumped backward, cursing. "Lady seems unreasonable too," Nate observed. The gunman retreated to his horse. His face had gone red. Embarrassment was dangerous on men like him. "That was a warning shot," Thomas called out. "Next one won't be." But Hattie heard something new in his voice. Respect maybe. Or recognition that this wouldn't be as easy as planned. The afternoon dragged on. Shadows lengthened. The riders took turns watering their horses at a distant creek. never leaving the cabin unwatched. "They're not going anywhere," Hattie said. "Neither are we." She studied Nate's profile. The strong jaw, the eyes that had seen too much but hadn't turned cold. Somewhere under the mountain man exterior lived the kind of person her brother would have trusted, would have died beside. "What happens when it gets dark? They'll come for us, fire probably, smoke us out. Then we need to move first." Nate turned to look at her. "We? You think I'm going to hide in here while you fight my brother's killers?" Something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, the recognition that some fights chose you whether you wanted them or not. "There's a ravine behind the cabin," Nate said. "Runs east toward the main trail. If we can reach it after sunset." "What about the horses?" "Leave them. We'll be moving on foot through rough country." The plan was desperate, probably hopeless, but sitting in the cabin waiting for fire or bullets wasn't much better. "Nate," her voice was barely a whisper. "The woman in your locket, Mary, what happened to her?" His hand stilled on the rifle. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "She died. Cholera epidemic 2 years back. We were going to be married when I got back from the mountains." "I'm sorry. She was good, deserved better than a man who lived like an animal in the wilderness." "Maybe she loved the man, not the life." He looked at her then, really looked. Something shifted in his expression, a door opening that had been closed for a long time. "Your forged papers," he said. "Sarah Johnson, what are you running from?" She told him about Mississippi, about the Weatherby plantation and the missing brooch, about accusations that followed her north, about a world that saw her as guilty until proven innocent and sometimes not even then. "So we're both ghosts," he said when she finished. "Ghosts with unfinished business." The sun touched the horizon, painted the sky the color of dried blood. Soon the riders would make their move. Hattie checked her rifle one more time. 6 rounds in the chamber, a box of shells in her bag. Not much against 8 men, but it would have to be enough. "Ready?" Nate asked. She thought about Marcus, about justice and silver lockets and men who died for believing the world could be better. "Ready?" Darkness fell like a curtain across the Badlands. Stars appeared one by one in the vast Montana sky. The riders had moved closer. Their campfire threw dancing shadows between the cottonwoods. Hattie crouched by the cabin's back wall. The loose board Nate had found would give them access to the root cellar. From there, 30 yards of open ground to the ravine. 30 yards that might as well be 30 miles. "When I give the signal," Nate whispered, "run straight for the rocks. Don't look back." She nodded. Her hands were steady on the rifle. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The board came free with barely a whisper. Cool air drifted up from the root cellar. It smelled of earth and old potatoes, of dreams buried underground. They dropped into darkness. The cellar was smaller than expected. Root vegetables hung in braided strings from the ceiling. Mason jars lined wooden shelves. Someone had prepared for a hard winter that never ended. The outside entrance was a wooden door set into the hillside. Nate pressed his ear against it, listened. Clear. The door opened onto starlight. The ravine cut a black line through the scrubland. Between them and safety lay empty ground. No cover, no second chances. Now they ran. Hattie's boots found every loose stone, every patch of gravel. The sound seemed to echo across the entire territory. Behind them, shouts erupted from the riders' camp. A rifle cracked. The bullet whined past her ear. The ravine's edge appeared suddenly. A drop into darkness. Nate grabbed her hand as they went over. They tumbled down the rocky slope, landed hard in the dry creek bed below. Above them, lantern light danced as the riders reached the rim. "There," Tom Cassidy's voice carried clearly in the still air. "In the wash." More rifle fire. Muzzle flashes lit the night. Bullets sparked off rocks around them. Nate pulled her deeper into the ravine. The creek bed wound east toward the main trail, toward civilization, toward help that might not come. They ran bent double, used the ravine walls for cover. Behind them, riders spread out along the rim, hunting. "This way leads to town," Thomas called down. "Nowhere else to go. We can wait." His voice carried the patience of a man who'd planned this carefully, who knew every trail and hideout for miles around. Hattie's lungs burned. Her legs felt heavy as lead. Beside her, Nate moved with the easy lope of a man born to wild country, but even he was breathing hard. The ravine curved north. Away from town, away from help. "It's a trap," she gasped. Nate stopped, studied the terrain ahead. The ravine narrowed to a slot canyon, high walls on both sides, one way in, one way out. "They've done this before," he said. Above them, lantern light moved closer. The riders were descending into the ravine, closing the net. "There's another way," Hattie said. "Up the north wall, I saw handholds." Nate followed her gaze. The rock face looked impossible. 60 feet of vertical stone. "You ever climbed before?" "No, neither have they." It was the only advantage they had. Town boys and hired guns weren't mountain climbers. The first handhold was a crack in the sandstone, barely wide enough for fingertips. Hattie pulled herself up, found a foothold. Another crack. The rock was rough against her palms. Ancient stone worn smooth by wind and weather. Each hold had to be tested, trusted. Below, lantern light flickered in the ravine. The riders were moving faster now, following the obvious trail, 20 feet up, 30. The ground fell away beneath them. One slip would mean broken bones, maybe worse. "Don't look down," Nate whispered. But she had to look down. Had to see Thomas Whitmore's lantern emerging from the slot canyon. Had to watch his face when he realized they were gone. The expression that crossed his features wasn't disappointment. It was rage, cold and calculating. "Find them," he ordered. "They can't have gone far." But they had gone far. Up into country where soft men in clean clothes couldn't follow, where survival meant more than money or political connections. The climb took forever. Each handhold a small victory, each foot of elevation bought with aching muscles and scraped palms. Finally they reached the rim, collapsed on solid ground. The ravine yawned below them. The riders' lanterns looked tiny as fireflies. "Now what?" Hattie asked. "Now we disappear." But disappearing meant leaving Marcus's killers unpunished, meant letting Governor Hayes continue his reign of corruption, meant good men would keep dying for silver and political power. "There's another way," she said. Nate studied her face in the starlight. "What way?" "We don't run, we hunt." The idea was insane. 2 people against 8. Against men with resources and connections. Against a system designed to protect the powerful. "They expect us to keep running," she continued, "to hide until they find us. What if we don't? What if we die? Then we die fighting." Marcus would understand that. Nate was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held something she hadn't heard before. Hope. "The other lockets, the ones that belong to the dead witnesses. They're hidden at Crow's Nest Mine. All of them. Marcus and I cached them there before we were separated. 5 lockets together make a map to evidence that could bring down Hayes and everyone who works for him. Including Thomas. Including Thomas." The plan formed between them without words. Stop running, start hunting. Use the hunter's confidence against them. "How do we get to Crow's Nest?" "Carefully. Hayes has men watching the mine, but there are old mining tunnels. Ways in that most people don't know about." Hattie thought about her brother, about his belief in justice, about the law being bigger than any one man's greed. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe justice was worth dying for. Maybe it was worth killing for too. "When do we start?" Nate's smile was barely visible in the darkness, but she felt it, the shift from prey to predator, from victims to hunters. "Now." They moved north across the Badlands, away from the ravine and the frustrated riders below, away from the obvious trails and easy paths. Behind them, Thomas Whitmore's voice carried on the wind, ordering his men to spread out, to search every draw and canyon. But they were searching for people who no longer existed. The mail-order bride and the dying mountain man were gone. In their place walked something harder, more dangerous. Justice had teeth now, and it was finally ready to bite. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient light falling on ancient stone. The same stars that had watched the massacre at Crow's Nest. that had seen good men die for other men's greed. Tonight those stars would witness something different. Tonight the hunt would begin. Crow's Nest Mine squatted against the mountainside like a wound in the earth. Dawn light painted the abandoned workings gray and lifeless. Hattie counted 6 guards scattered around the entrance, men who looked comfortable with violence. She and Nate had traveled through the night, moving like ghosts across broken country, following game trails and dry washes, staying invisible. "There's the tunnel Marcus and I used," Nate pointed to a barely visible crack in the rock face, 50 yards up from the main entrance. The climb would leave them exposed, but the guards were watching the obvious approaches, not the impossible ones. "What about them?" Hattie nodded toward the sentries. "They're expecting Thomas and his men, not us." The assumption might get them killed, or it might get them close enough to matter. They waited until the guards changed shifts, used the confusion to start their climb. The rock was treacherous, loose shale that wanted to slide, handholds that crumbled at the wrong moment, but they reached the tunnel entrance. A hole barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. It breathed cool air that smelled of deep earth and old death. "Stay close," Nate whispered. "This place has claimed its share of miners." The tunnel sloped downward into absolute darkness. Their hands found the walls, followed the rough-hewn stone deeper into the mountain's belly. Water dripped somewhere ahead. The sound echoed strangely in the confined space. Behind them, daylight faded to a distant memory. Here, Nate's voice came from their left, a side passage she hadn't seen, narrower than the main tunnel, but it led toward their destination. They crawled now. The ceiling pressed down like the weight of the entire mountain. Hattie's breathing came shallow and quick. The darkness was alive, hungry, almost there. The passage opened into a larger chamber. Nate struck a match. The flame revealed rough walls carved from living rock, tools scattered on the ground, evidence of men who died for silver they'd never spend. In the chamber's center sat a wooden crate, innocent-looking, but Hattie felt the weight of its importance, the power it represented. "The evidence cache," Nate nodded, lifted the lid. Inside were the 3 remaining lockets, identical to the ones they carried, each one open to reveal not photographs but carved markings, symbols that meant nothing by themselves. But together with their 2 lockets, the symbols formed something else. Coordinates, dates, names of men in high places who'd ordered murder for profit. Governor Hayes, Nate said, Territorial Judge Morrison, Senator Crawford, all the way up the chain. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Not just local corruption, but a network that reached the territorial capital, maybe Washington itself. This could bring them all down, if we live long enough to use it. The match burned down to Nate's fingers. Darkness swallowed them again, but now they carried more than hope. They carried proof. The crawl back through the tunnels felt longer, more desperate. Above them, the guards would have noticed their absence by now, would be searching. They emerged into daylight to find the search already begun. Voices echoed off the canyon walls, men spreading out in all directions. There, Tom Cassidy's voice carried clearly in the thin air, movement by the old entrance. They'd been spotted. The rifle cracked before Hattie could think. Her shot took Cassidy in the shoulder, spun him around but didn't drop him. "Run!" They scrambled down the mountainside. Loose rock cascaded around them. Every step threatened to start an avalanche. Behind them, rifle fire erupted. Bullets whined off stone, sparked and ricocheted in dangerous directions. The slope leveled into a boulder field. Cover at last. They dove behind a house-sized stone as bullets chewed the air above them. 6 men left, Nate counted, plus whoever Thomas brings when he gets here. He's coming. They've been signaling. Smoke signals from the next ridge. Hattie looked where he pointed. Sure enough, thin wisps of smoke rose against the blue sky. Messages passed in the old way, the way that required no words. How long? An hour. Maybe less. The boulder field stretched toward a narrow canyon, their only escape route, but it meant crossing open ground under the guards' rifles. "We need a distraction." Nate studied the terrain, the mine entrance, the guards' positions. The powder magazine. Marcus and I spotted it during our reconnaissance if we can reach it. What about the lockets? One of us takes them and runs, the other creates the distraction. The division of labor was clear, obvious, and completely unacceptable to Hattie. No, it's the only way. Then we find another way. But there was no other way. The mathematics of survival were brutal, simple. One person might make it through the canyon. Two would certainly die. Nate began removing the lockets from his pocket. You know the territory better now, know who to trust. I don't know anyone to trust. The territorial marshal, the real one, not the badge-wearing killer Thomas brought. His name is Samuel Kirk, lives in Miles City. What if he's corrupt too? Then we're all dead anyway. The logic was unassailable and completely heartless. There has to be another way. But even as she said it, Hattie knew there wasn't. The lockets were more important than their lives, more important than love or hope or the future they might have built together. Justice demanded sacrifice, always had. When this is over, Nate said, when Hayes and his people are in prison, what then? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility, with dreams that might never have the chance to grow. I was thinking about a cabin, Hattie said, somewhere with good water, good soil, far from men who think silver is worth more than human life. Sounds peaceful. It does. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the guards positioning themselves, to the sound of approaching hoofbeats from the canyon mouth. Thomas had arrived. Time to go, Nate said. He pressed the lockets into her hands. Their metal was warm from his body heat, alive with the weight of dead men's testimony. Nate, don't say it. Don't make this harder than it already is. But she had to say it, had to speak the words that had been building between them since the moment she'd pulled him into her wagon. I love you. His hand found her face, traced the line of her cheek, memorized her features against the darkness coming. I love you too. The words were admission and goodbye, promise and release. Give me 10 minutes, he said. Then run for the canyon, don't look back. Nate, but he was already moving, slipping between the boulders toward the mine entrance, toward the powder magazine and the distraction that would cost him everything. Hattie clutched the lockets to her chest, 5 pieces of silver that would topple an empire, or become her brother's monument if she failed. Around her, the boulder field waited, patient as stone, ready to hide her passage or mark her grave. In the distance, an explosion shattered the morning quiet. The distraction had begun. It was time to run. The explosion echoed through the canyon like thunder. Rock and dust rained from the sky. Hattie ran toward the sound instead of away from it. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. But some things mattered more than survival. She found Nate pinned beneath a fallen timber. Blood seeped from a gash on his forehead. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. You were supposed to run, he whispered when she knelt beside him. Never been good at following orders. The timber was heavy, solid pine from the mine's original construction. She braced her feet and pulled. The wood shifted but didn't budge. Leave me. Take the lockets. We leave together. Voices carried from the mine entrance. Thomas and his men regrouping after the explosion. They'd be here soon. Hattie found a piece of broken rail, used it as a lever. The timber groaned, shifted. Nate pulled his legs free. Can you walk? Do I have a choice? They stumbled toward the canyon mouth. Behind them, Thomas's voice cut through the dust in confusion. Find them. They can't have gone far. The canyon walls pressed close. Sunlight filtered down in narrow shafts. Their footsteps echoed off stone worn smooth by centuries of flash floods. There's a way out, Nate said. Side passage about a mile ahead. A mile might as well be 100. Every step sent pain shooting through his injured leg. Hattie could see him fighting to stay conscious. Tell me about the cabin, she said. The one we're going to build. Big windows facing east. To catch the morning light. What else? Garden for vegetables, chickens maybe, normal things. Normal. The word felt foreign after everything they'd been through, but it also felt possible, worth fighting for. The side passage was barely a crack in the canyon wall. They squeezed through sideways, emerged into a hidden valley carpeted with grass. In the center of the valley stood a cabin. Smoke rose from its chimney. Someone was home. "Samuel Kirk," Nate said. "The marshal I told you about." They approached carefully. Too many betrayals had taught them caution. But the man who emerged from the cabin wore his authority quietly, without swagger. "You'll be Nathaniel Thatcher," he said. "Been looking for you. Good looking or bad looking. The kind that ends with justice being served." Marshal Kirk was older than Hattie expected, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes that spoke of hard decisions. But his handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "You have something for me?" Hattie produced the 5 lockets, laid them on the cabin's rough table. Kirk opened each one, studied the markings inside. "Governor Hayes, Judge Morrison, Senator Crawford." His voice was flat, professional. "This is enough to hang them all. Will it stick? Federal marshals are already moving. Washington's been watching Hayes for months. They just needed proof." The words washed over Hattie like cool water. Justice, finally, after all the running and dying in fear. "What about Thomas Whitmore? He'll hang with the rest. Murder's murder regardless of who your uncle is." Outside, horses approached. Hattie tensed, reached for her rifle. "Easy," Kirk said. "Those are my deputies." 3 men dismounted outside. Federal badges glinted on their vests. Real law had finally arrived. "We found Thomas and his men at the mine," one deputy reported. "They're asking for deals, willing to testify against Hayes in exchange for their lives." "Let them testify," Kirk said. "Then hang them anyway." The next hours passed in a blur of statements and testimonies. Federal marshals spread out across the territory, arresting corrupt officials, seizing documents, dismantling Hayes's network piece by piece. By sunset, it was over. "There'll be a reward," Kirk told them. "Congress appropriated funds for information leading to Hayes's arrest." "Don't want it," Hattie said. "What do you want?" She looked at Nate, at the man who taught her that some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. "A piece of land, somewhere quiet, somewhere we can build that cabin." Kirk smiled. "I know just the place. Valley about 50 miles north. Good water, good soil. Previous owner won't be needing it anymore." "Why not?" He was one of Hayes's men, properties being confiscated by the federal government. "I could put in a word." 3 months later, Hattie stood in the doorway of their new cabin. Morning light streamed through the east-facing windows, exactly as Nate had described. He was outside splitting wood for the stove. His leg had healed straight. His strength had returned. But sometimes she caught him staring at the mountains, remembering. "Coffee's ready," she called. He set down the axe, came inside. His hands were rough from honest work, his eyes clear. "Any regrets?" he asked. She thought about the question, about the mail-order bride who'd answered Thomas Whitmore's advertisement, about the safe life that had been a trap, about the dangerous path that led to freedom. "Only one." "What's that?" "I regret not finding you sooner." He pulled her close. She felt his heartbeat, strong and steady, alive. "Where should we go today?" she asked. They'd taken to riding out together in the afternoons, exploring their valley, learning its moods and seasons. "Wherever you're leading," he said, "I'm coming with you." The words had become their promise, their daily choice, not ownership but partnership, not obligation but love freely given. Outside, their horses waited. The valley stretched endless and green, full of possibilities. They rode toward the distant mountains. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness, who'd chosen each other in the light. Behind them, smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, evidence of home, of belonging, of dreams built on solid ground. The wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers, of rain coming over the mountains, of seasons turning toward hope. Justice had been served. Love had taken root. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.